We got some breaking news coming out of the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, which sits over Illinois, about this fast-moving story about Donald Trump's attempt through shock forces to do a hostile takeover of Illinois to embarrass blue governors. And in particular, a decision just last week by Judge Perry, federal district judge in the Northern District of Illinois, in which she ruled that there should be no commandeering takeover of the state militia, the National Guard. There should be no deployment in Illinois because the factors that have to be present to allow a president to do that are missing. That's now gone up to the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals. And just over the weekend, the 7th Circuit has ruled on an administrative stay, holding the ring only until they can get full briefing. They've ruled that one part of Judge Perry's order, in which she cites to the founding fathers and the framers as her justification to stop an out-of-control president using state militia against his own people, they've stayed the part about deployment. Very similar to what the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals did just about 10 days ago in California about an Oregon case. They said the same thing. We're going to let the federalization happen, but stay in your barracks and don't hit the streets until we decide on the deployment aspect of it, whether you're allowed to deploy, and on the entire appeal. This against the backdrop of the Trump administration, J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, and the real president of the United States, Stephen Miller, using the I word over and over again of insurrection. J.D. Vance, just this past weekend with Kristen Welker on one of those Sunday morning news shows, said, we're going to litigate this as much as we need to. We're going to just be litigating the heck out of it. And we're considering the Insurrection Act. We'll talk about the Insurrection Act and all of that right here on Legal AF on Monday. Hit the free subscribe button. That really does help keep us on the air. And you can see why it's so important. Let's start with how we got here and why the 7th Circuit did anything. And what is this Insurrection Act that they keep talking about? Let me start with bringing the receipts, right? Let's start with J.D. Vance and Donald Trump talking about the Insurrection Act. J.D. Vance, just this weekend, Kristen Welker, sort of slightly bemused and also in her questioning, quizzical, said to him, you're not planning to use the Insurrection Act, are you? That has been used 30 times in our nation's history, the last time in 1992 during the LA riots off of Rodney King. And, the scary part about the Insurrection Act is that it's very difficult, I wouldn't say impossible, but very difficult for federal courts to provide oversight to stop an out-of-control president when it comes to the invocation of the Insurrection Act. If he sees a rebellion, if he sees domestic violence, he's allowed to do things like send the military in, federalize the National Guard, and try to quell that violence. And while he doesn't get his own facts, it's very hard, given the deference that a president is given on the Insurrection Act. And Donald Trump knows it. He considered the Insurrection Act, and Jeffrey Clark at the Department of Justice back in 2020 told him to invoke the Insurrection Act over the 2020 election. Let's watch J.D. Vance with Kristen Welker.
Let me ask you, of course, there's a major legal battle underway about the administration's deployment of the National Guard. It does come as NBC News is reporting that the administration has been seriously discussing invoking the Insurrection Act. That would give the president the power to direct federal troops to conduct law enforcement functions in the case of a national emergency. Is that the case? Are you seriously considering invoking the Insurrection Act?
Well, the president's looking at all of his options. Right now, he hasn't felt he needed to, but we have to remember, why are we talking about this, Kristen? Because crime has gotten out of control in our cities, because our ICE agents, the people who are enforcing our immigration laws, have faced a 1,000% increase in violent attacks against them. We have people right now who are going out there, who are doing the job the president asked them to do, who are enforcing our immigration laws. They're being assaulted, they're being beaten, they're being shot at. The problem here is not the Insurrection Act or whether we actually invoke it or not. The problem is the fact that the entire media in this country, cheered on by a few far-left lunatics, have made it okay to tee off on American law enforcement. We cannot accept that in the United States of America. We want everybody, black or white, rich or poor, to be safe in the United States of America.
Is there a rebellion here? That's what would trigger an Insurrection Act. Is it imminent?
Kristen, crime is down in Chicago and Portland often because they're so overwhelmed at the local level, they're not even keeping the statistics properly. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had an ICE office get shot at by a far-left assassin who was trying to kill our law enforcement officers. He fortunately didn't kill law enforcement officers. He did kill some other innocent people in the process. We cannot allow the far left in this country to tee off on our law enforcement officers. Okay. We've got to do something about it. And that's all the president's talking about.
Now, that's consistent. Sometimes J.D. Vance goes on the air and puts his silver foot in his mouth and makes it worse for Trump. But this is consistent with the same line of thinking of the Trump administration and the vocabulary of the Trump administration. Here's Donald Trump about the Insurrection Act a week ago.
Insurrection Act, under what conditions or terms would you?
Well, I'd do it if it was necessary. So far, it hasn't been necessary, but we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. If I had to enact it, I'd do that. If people were being killed and courts were holding us up, or governors or mayors were holding us up, sure, I'd do that. I mean, I want to make sure that people aren't killed. We have to make sure that our cities are safe. And it's turning out, and we started with D.C. It's been so successful.
And this is all coming out of the fevered mind and imagination, dark imagination of Stephen Miller. Forget his title. I think he's the deputy White House chief of staff. He's got so much influence. He's effectively domestic policy czar for Donald Trump. He's basically the co-president. And here's the crazy crap that Stephen Miller has said since he's been, talk about the Kraken. He's been released and he's able to do everything. He hates America. He's not a patriot. He hates anybody that's black and brown. And he's surrounded himself with people that think the same way. Here's some the worst of Stephen Miller and some of his clips. Okay, let's run those.
You've called the district judge's ruling blocking the deployment of National Guard in Oregon legal insurrection. Does the administration still plan to abide by that ruling?
Well, the administration filed an appeal this morning with the Ninth Circuit. I would note the administration won an identical case in the Ninth Circuit just a few months ago with respect to the federalizing of the California National Guard. This is organized domestic terrorism. The purpose of domestic terrorism is to obtain, through violence and intimidation and the threat of violence, a change in politics or policy that cannot be obtained through lawful democratic means. So when you have a 10-car ramming attack with armed attackers clearly intending to murder ICE officers in the conduct of their duties, what else can you call that, right? Remember, the central issue that was litigated in 2024 was whether or not to turn back the border invasion. Americans voted to send the illegals home. The invasion that took place was one of the greatest crimes that has ever happened in the history of this country. And now that ICE officers are simply trying to execute on the mandate of the last election and the laws that were passed by Congress, they have been the victims of an unceasing campaign of violence and intimidation and terrorism. As Secretary Noem said, there are now bounties on the heads of ICE officers. They have to shield their families' identities at school and in public. They're being constantly doxxed and threatened with assassination. Again, we're just days from an attempted mass assassination of ICE officers at an ICE facility. And the response to that has been to try to, for example, in Chicago, to try to prevent ICE officers from being able to enter key parts of the city to conduct their responsibilities. This is an all-out campaign of insurrection against the sovereignty of the United States because the Democrat Party and those who are committing violence in this country do not believe in the legitimacy of the sovereign territory of the United States, and they don't want any of these illegal aliens to go home. So they want to cement by force, by violent force, the invasion that took place between 2021 and 2024. Thank you.
Vote for the right to have a secure sovereign border and for the right to have a government that puts American citizens ahead of illegal aliens.
The President of the United States said, I am taking a stand today for American workers and the American economy, and we're putting American families first on immigration. We're saying our compassion, first and foremost, is for struggling American families, and our focus is on the national interest.
When did the American people sign up to be in every war, in every place, on every side of every conflict, all over planet Earth?
People that you don't connect with and understand the people whose manufacturing jobs have left, who've been besieged by high crime communities, and who've been affected by a policy of uncontrolled immigration, those voices, those experiences don't get covered on this network. You cannot conceive of a nation without a strong, secure border. It is fundamental and essential to the idea of sovereignty and national survival to have control over who enters and doesn't enter the country.
Please say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The same emotion you do on television. That's hard to do. I think that's going to be hard to do.
President Trump's initiative here in Washington, D.C., is important to understand, is the most successful anti-crime initiative in American history. I mean, just think about it for a second. In 30 days, President Trump put together a team that saw the largest ever violent crime reduction in any city in American history, something that people had not been able to do in 40 years. That is a momentous achievement. And now the president is going to take that same model to Memphis, and as he said, more cities after that. The team that President has put together has no equal today or anywhere in American history. I think what's happening here is that what the president has done is made clear. The power of federal law enforcement that was used for the last 4 years to harass and attack conservatives, to harass and attack Christians, to go after law-abiding families. The power of law enforcement under President Trump is going to be used to get all the criminals, all the violent offenders, all the murderers, all the cartels, and all the domestic terrorists off our streets. So whether you're Antifa, whether you're a domestic terrorist, whether you are a violent gang member, a drug trafficker, a trained Iraqwa killer, or anyone else that's threatening our people, President Trump is saying he's going to use his FBI, his DOD, his ATF, his DEA to wipe you out, to put you in behind bars, to take you off the street, or to apply whatever legal consequences necessary. Mr. President, I'm honored beyond words to be a part of this team under your leadership as you've saved thousands of lives.
Thank you very much. Come on over. Let's sign that bill.
All these demonstrators that you've seen out here in recent days, all of these elderly white hippies, they're not part of the city and never have been. And by the way, most of the citizens who live in Washington, D.C. are black. This is not a city that has had any safety for its black citizens for generations. And President Trump is the one who is fixing that with the support of the Metropolitan Police Department, the support of the National Guard, and our federal law enforcement officers. So we're going to ignore these stupid white hippies that all need to go home and take a nap because they're all over 90 years old, and we're going to get back to the business of protecting the American people and the citizens of Washington, D.C.
Now that takes us to Judge Perry. Back to back, we had two judges in Illinois last week, Judge Ellis and Judge Perry. Both make rulings. Judge Ellis, she ruled first, temporary restraining order against Donald Trump and his ICE troops using military-grade riot gear, pepper balls, non-lethal, lethal rubber bullets, and other launchers and gas against legitimate protesters, journalists, and clergy. The fact that they even had to enter, and she had to enter an order to stop attacking people for exercising their First Amendment rights, including people wearing the cloth, is mind-boggling to me, depraved and shameful. But she did. A day or so later, we had Judge Perry, broader issue in front of her. Should the Illinois Guard be commandeered, nationalized under a statute we call 12406 because we're under attack by a foreign country? No. Because there is a rebellion that's no. Organized group trying to overthrow America, or a group of dissenters. Dissent does not mean disloyalty. It means exercising your First Amendment right, or violence and actions that make it impossible for the president to execute federal law with his own federal forces. I don't see that. Where protests in front of ICE detention centers didn't mean ICE detention centers near Chicago weren't up and open for business. And so she cited to the founding fathers. And she said in the first page about how important this is, very similar to Judge Immergut and her order in Oregon a week earlier, which I know, obviously, Judge Perry read. This is what on the footnote, citing to the Federalist, papers number 29, written by Alexander Hamilton. If there should be an army to be made use of as the engine of despotism, what need of the militia? If there should be no army, whither would the militia? Irritated by being called upon to undertake a distant and hopeless expedition for the purpose of riveting the chains of slavery upon a part of their countrymen, direct their course but to the seat of the tyrants, who had meditated so foolish as well as so wicked a project, to crush them in their imagined entrenchments of power and to make them an example of the just vengeance of an abused and incensed people. Is this the way in which usurpers stride to dominion over a numerous and enlightened nation? Do they begin by exciting the detestation of the very instruments of their intended usurpations? Do they usually commence their career by wanton and disgustful acts of power calculated to answer no end, but to draw upon themselves hatred and execration? Are suppositions of this sort the sober admonitions of discerning patriots to a discerning people? This is how we're supposed to rule, using the guard against the American people? Judge Perry says no. And she blocked both the federalization of the State National Guard and its mobilization for Illinois. The Seventh Circuit, next stop on the train, just issued their administrative order on Saturday, similar to what the Ninth Circuit did about a week earlier. They thread the needle temporarily until all the briefs are in. The Seventh Circuit is going to allow the federalization. Sure, you want to call them up and stick them in their barracks. That's fine. Stick them in vans. But you're not to mobilize them until we've had a full hearing on the merits. They're setting a briefing schedule. I'll let you know who the 3-judge panel is, because that'll be very important as to where they came from, which administration nominated them. And we'll do all that on Legal AF Live Substack. One note to keep an eye on. I showed you clips of Stephen Miller. Out of control, deranged Stephen Miller. When he was in exile between the administrations, he formed a group called America First Legal. It's not related to Legal AF. America First Legal. They've just filed a request to file an amicus brief, which is a friend of the court brief, to advocate on behalf of the Trump administration. They are not independent. They are not neutral arbiters as friends of the court. They are a MAGA law firm created by Stephen Miller, who's in the White House, who's now trying to lob in a partisan, conflicted, political screed masquerading as an amicus brief to try to influence the Seventh Circuit. Hopefully they'll deny the request. I don't think they need amicus briefs here. I think especially from Donald Trump's own MAGA law firm. I mean, he's got his own Department of Justice. He has his own criminal defense lawyers all sitting in the Department of Justice, all the way up to the Solicitor General who argues cases to the Supreme Court. I don't think he needs yet another thumb on the scale, do you? We'll continue to follow it all right here. If you like this kind of reporting, hit the free subscribe button. Come on up to Legal AF, the Substack, because now if you're a Legal AF podcast audience member, a Legal AF YouTube member with our 10 videos a day, and Legal AF Substack, that's the cherry on the top. That helps us keep on the air, stay on the air. Hit the subscribe button. Think about becoming a paid member of Legal AF Substack as well. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.